Welcome to Scary Stories Daily, SSD. Let's get started. It was 6 years ago, a pivotal moment in my life. I was preparing for a big move, a leap across state lines, and the anticipation was heavy in the air. My mission, to rid myself of all the clutter that had accumulated over the years, to pare down my life to the essentials, and maybe pocket a little extra cash in the process. Craigslist was my weapon of choice, a virtual bazaar where I could easily offload my treasures, or more accurately, my junk. I meticulously crafted about 10 separate listings, each showcasing a random item I was willing to part with. I wasn't looking to make a killing, I just wanted these items gone, fast. Most were priced at less than a $20 bill, enticing potential buyers with bargains they couldn't resist. And for the most part, it worked. Within a week, all but a couple of items had new homes. One of the stragglers was an old workout bench, complete with a set of weights that had seen better days. As my impending move drew nearer, that workout bench became the bane of my existence. I didn't want to haul it into a moving truck and then into my new place, it was just too bulky and heavy. So, I waited and waited, hoping for a bite on that listing. Then, like a bolt from the blue, an email notification popped up on my screen. The subject line was simple, "I can pick it up today." There were no pleasantries, no introductions, just that one cryptic sentence. It should have set off alarm bells, but I was in a hurry, and the prospect of finally getting rid of that bench clouded my judgment. I fired back a reply, asking the prospective buyer when they could swing by. What followed was a bizarre exchange that unfolded over the course of an hour. The responses were curt, and the conversation seemed to drag on forever. It was as if this person was deliberately trying to stretch it out to keep me engaged. The unease simmered within me, but the impending move drowned out any lingering doubts. Finally, the day arrived, just a few days before my scheduled move. The buyer had been silent since our last exchange, and I had almost forgotten about the peculiar interaction. I was busy in the kitchen, my phone within arm's reach, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a car pulling up outside, followed by the eerie echo of footsteps approaching the front door. I waited, holding my breath, expecting the doorbell to ring or a firm knock to break the silence. But nothing. I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer, so I ventured to the door, hoping to see my buyer. What I saw sent a shiver down my spine. The man standing there looked startled, as if he hadn't expected me to answer the door. Yet, he wasn't moving. He just stood there, hands buried in his pockets, fixated on something unseen in the distance. "You're here for the workout stuff?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He nodded, but his eyes remained distant, vacant. It was unnerving, to say the least. This wasn't just shyness or social awkwardness, it was something deeper, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. We stood side by side, a silence hanging in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. I expected him to inspect the workout bench, to ask a few questions, or at the very least, to speak more than a word or two. But he did none of that. He just stood there. Then, another knock, this time at the front door. The man's head snapped around, his eyes widening as if he were gauging my reaction. My instincts screamed at me that something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't afford to panic. Not yet. I started to walk toward the front door, and the man trailed close behind me. Just before I reached the hallway, his fingers clamped around my arm, stopping me dead in my tracks. I yanked away instinctively, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling. But the man offered no explanation. His face remained an inscrutable mask of indifference. Another knock, a third and more insistent one. This time, the man didn't hesitate. He bolted down the hallway, flinging the front door open, and I had just enough time to turn and sprint out the back door. As I raced across my neighbor's yard, I glanced back at my house. I watched in horror as 3 more men entered my home, their intentions unclear but undoubtedly sinister. I knew I had narrowly escaped a nightmare. Hiding behind a tree, I called the police, my voice shaking as I recounted the surreal events that had unfolded. While I waited, I watched the windows of my house, my heart pounding in my chest. What would they do if they realized I had escaped? Minutes felt like hours, and the movement inside my house finally ceased. A creeping sense of dread settled over me. What had those intruders wanted, and what would they have done to me if I had opened the door or remained inside? The police arrived, but there was little evidence left behind by the intruders. My home was nearly empty, a testament to my impending move. The only substantial lead I could provide was a description of the man I had let inside. As I reflected on that harrowing encounter, one thing became clear: Craigslist, once a convenient platform for buying and selling, had transformed into a potential breeding ground for danger. I vowed never to use it again, and I urge anyone who crosses my path to heed my warning. Sometimes, in the pursuit of simplicity and a few extra bucks, we unwittingly open doors to a world of darkness we can't fathom. It was a crisp autumn day when I decided to scour Craigslist for some outdoor furniture. Freshly moved into a new house with a beautiful backyard patio, I was eager to make it a cozy haven for relaxation. However, I wasn't about to break the bank on a patio set, and my online quest began. The Craigslist listings were a mixed bag of outdated and well-worn pieces, but I bided my time, sifting through the options. Then, like a beacon in the night, I spotted it, a simple yet appealing 2-chair and 1-table setup. It looked clean, and the price was right. I fired off an email and waited. Within minutes, a response arrived from the seller, a guy named Jared. Jared explained that the set was brand new but had suffered a few minor scratches during shipping. After a brief back and forth, we settled on a meeting time for the following day, around 6 p.m. at his place. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I drove to Jared's address. The first thing that struck me was how dark his house was. The entire place seemed devoid of light, except for the front porch, illuminated by a single bulb. The house itself exuded an air of opulence, as if it were plucked from a millionaire's fantasy. I parked in front of the house, and my unease began to simmer. When I approached the front door and rang the bell, the chime echoed inside, but nothing else followed, no lights, no footsteps. I peered through the small window on the porch, not meaning to snoop but just trying to discern any sign of life within. I saw nothing unusual, just a typical interior, but not a soul in sight. Startled by the vibration of my phone, I jumped back from the window. It was Jared, instructing me to come around to the backyard through the fence. This peculiar arrangement felt off, but the prospect of acquiring patio furniture prevailed in my mind, and I complied. I walked around the house and entered the backyard through a wooden gate. Jared appeared from around a corner, giving me a wave before leading me to the furniture. My initial surprise turned into astonishment as I took in the sight. The set was impeccable, high quality, and almost too perfect. It looked as if it had always belonged there, accompanied by complimentary decorations and even coasters on the table for drinks. It didn't feel like a sale, it felt like I was intruding on someone's private oasis. I took a seat in one of the chairs, examining it for any imperfections. But my leisurely inspection was abruptly interrupted when Jared's demeanor shifted. His friendly smile vanished, replaced by impatience. He grew pushy, demanding a decision, and it became clear that he was more interested in my cash than my comfort. A wave of discomfort washed over me as I noticed the furniture was meticulously placed, blending seamlessly into the backyard's ambience. It didn't seem like Jared was the rightful owner or seller. The whole situation began to unravel, and my instincts screamed that something was deeply amiss. "I need some time to think about it," I stammered, my voice trembling. His response was unsettling. He took a step closer, then another, his demeanor becoming increasingly menacing. It was then that I realized he had sinister intentions. I turned on my heel and bolted toward the front of the house, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I could hear Jared's hurried footsteps behind me as I raced for the gate. Sprinting to my car, I watched in horror as he pursued me relentlessly. It was a narrow escape. From the safety of my vehicle, I watched as Jared exited the gate and darted across the yard, disappearing into a waiting car on the intersecting road. The engine roared to life, and they sped away, leaving me in a state of shock. I immediately dialed 911, recounting the bizarre ordeal. As the authorities delved into the matter, a chilling truth emerged: Jared had attempted to sell furniture that didn't belong to him. The homeowners were on vacation, unaware that a stranger had infiltrated their property. While no signs of a break-in were found, the mystery remained: how did Jared know the family was away? Reflecting on that hair-raising encounter, I can't help but shudder at the thought of what could have happened had I lingered even a moment longer. It's a stark reminder that danger often lurks in unexpected places, even in the pursuit of a simple purchase on a familiar platform like Craigslist. I had just moved to a small, quaint town in rural Pennsylvania, looking for a fresh start after a tumultuous year in the city. The old house I had bought needed some work, and I was in search of furniture that wouldn't break the bank. I turned to Craigslist, hoping to find some hidden gems among the listings. Little did I know, I was about to stumble into a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was scrolling through the furniture section when I came across a peculiar listing. The title simply read, "Antique Mirror, Free to a Good Home." Intrigued, I clicked on it to learn more. The description mentioned an ornate, vintage mirror that the seller claimed to be an heirloom from the 1800s. They were giving it away for free to anyone who would come to pick it up. I was immediately drawn to the idea of having a beautiful antique mirror in my new home. I didn't have much experience with antiques, but the thought of owning a piece of history was appealing. I reached out to the seller, who went by the name Eleanor, and we quickly set up a time for me to pick up the mirror. The address Eleanor provided led me to a remote, wooded area just outside of town. It was a cloudy evening, and as I drove deeper into the forest, the tall trees seemed to swallow up the road, casting eerie shadows in the fading light. My phone's GPS signal began to waver, and I felt a growing sense of isolation. Finally, I arrived at a dilapidated old house. It looked like something out of a horror movie, with peeling paint, broken windows, and an overgrown yard that had not seen a lawnmower in years. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether I should continue or turn back, but my curiosity got the best of me. I parked my car and cautiously approached the front door, which was ajar. The hinges creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The air inside was heavy with a musty, old scent, and I could hear the faint sound of a piano playing in the distance. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty house. There was no response. I took a hesitant step inside, feeling a growing sense of unease. The source of the piano music became apparent as I ventured further into the house. It was coming from a grand, dusty piano in the corner of the living room. The keys played themselves, as if by an invisible hand. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. That's when I saw her, a woman in a long, tattered dress, her back to me, her fingers dancing across the piano keys. Her hair was a cascade of dark locks that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. She just continued to play, her movements graceful and haunting. I took a step closer, my unease growing with each moment. When I was just a few feet away, I reached out to touch her shoulder, but my hand passed right through her, as if she were made of smoke. I stumbled back in shock, my mind racing to make sense of what I had just witnessed. The woman at the piano slowly turned to face me, and her eyes were empty, devoid of life. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, a chilling, otherworldly whisper filled the room, sending a shiver down my spine. Terrified, I turned and ran for the front door, desperate to escape the nightmare that had unfolded before me. But as I reached for the doorknob, I realized with horror that it had vanished. The door was gone, as if it had never existed. Panic set in as I frantically searched for another way out. The windows were all sealed shut, and the walls seemed to close in on me. I was trapped in this haunted house, with the ghostly woman at the piano as my only company. She continued to play, the mournful melody filling the air, suffocating me with its sadness. I pleaded with her to let me go, to release me from this nightmare, but she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the piano keys. Hours turned into days, or at least it felt that way. Time seemed to lose all meaning as I remained trapped in that cursed house. I tried everything to escape, breaking windows, shouting for help, even attempting to communicate with the ghostly woman, but nothing worked. My strength began to wane, and I could feel myself slipping further into despair. I had resigned myself to the fact that I would never escape this house, that I would become just another lost soul trapped in its haunted halls. Then, one night, as I lay on the dusty floor, on the verge of giving up hope, I heard a faint voice. It was distant at first, but it grew louder and more distinct with each passing moment. Someone was calling my name. Sarah. Sarah, can you hear me? I blinked in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what was happening. The voice was coming from the antique mirror that had brought me to this nightmare in the first place. It was Eleanor's voice, the woman who had given me the mirror. With a renewed sense of determination, I crawled toward the mirror, reaching out to touch its surface. To my astonishment, my hand passed through it, just as it had with the ghostly woman at the piano. I could feel a strange, pulsing energy emanating from the mirror, pulling me toward it. Without hesitation, I stepped through the mirror, and everything changed. I found myself back in my own home, safe and sound, as if nothing had happened. The antique mirror that had been the source of my nightmare now hung innocently on my wall, as if it had never been anything more than a piece of furniture. I couldn't explain what had happened, whether it was a supernatural experience or a hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion. All I knew was that I had escaped the clutches of that haunted house, and I would never forget the horrors I had witnessed within its walls. As for the antique mirror, I couldn't bear to keep it in my home any longer. I sold it on Craigslist, hoping that someone else might be foolish enough to take it off my hands. But I made sure to include a warning in the listing, a cautionary tale of the nightmare that had befallen me. I may never know the true nature of that mirror or the ghostly woman who inhabited it, but I have no doubt that it was something far more sinister than a simple piece of furniture. And I can only hope that whoever is unfortunate enough to come across it next will heed my warning and stay far, far away.